Buying Melbourne, where capital meets property. I'm your host, Madeline Roberts. Let's begin. So, today I'm going to be talking about renovating property for profit. So, this can sometimes be a little bit controversial online. I see different takes, but for myself, I think that buying to renovate, either for equity uplift to enable you to do your next purchase faster, or in some cases, to buy, renovate, and sell is one of the quickest ways to help you grow your wealth. So, I'm going to dive in today at a few different topics that I think we should cover off if you are considering renovating property for profit. I'm going to give some examples personally where I have made profit through renovation. So, example number one was a purchase, renovation, sell. So, in order for this to work, the numbers must be extremely tight. Anybody who is looking to purchase, renovate, and sell, I do strongly recommend that you perhaps look into a course to better understand this, because in order to make a strong enough profit to be able to sell quite quickly, the purchase price has to be significantly below market value. So there is different ways that you need to learn how to be able to actually obtain property that far below market value. Furthermore, another very important part is your feasibility. Now, these have to be so tight. I have seen people purchase property to renovate and sell, and that most of the time doesn't work if they don't go in with a very strong plan. So this is something else that you would cover off in courses, and I'm going to break this down as well as I can in a 20-minute window today. If you are able to purchase property low enough below market value that you are able to then renovate it within a tight time frame and sell it, obviously that's going to be an excellent capital hit for you. So you're going to come out with maybe $100,000 to $200,000 net profit at the end of that if you do it well and do it correctly, and that's going to help you with your next property renovation if you wish to do so. Obviously, if there is not enough meat in your profit, some people might choose to buy, renovate, and hold. And if you just value the property that you've purchased, you think it would be a good asset to have in your portfolio, obviously it's oftentimes worth renovating and holding. So I'm going to give the example of when we purchased, renovated, and then sold. So that project took around about 4 to 5 months, and that's from buy, renovate, market, and settle. In order to successfully complete that type of project, you need to have a very strong feasibility. You need to be buying the property well below market value. And some of the things you also need to consider in your feasibility, they're not only your paint, kitchen, bathroom renovation costs, but you need to make sure that you are taking into account interest on your loan, rates, insurances, because every dollar that is not accounted for will really catch you by surprise and eat into your profit. And obviously, at the end of the day, if you're not going to see a strong enough profit from the project, it's simply not worth taking on. So I often see people ask in renovation forums whether there's specific markets that you need to be tapping into in order to be able to successfully complete a project where you buy, renovate, and sell. And the truth is, you just need to be able to buy into a market that is rising. So obviously, if you're buying into a market that is going down, it is going to make your project very hard to come out the other side with profit. You don't necessarily need to be buying into an area that is booming, because the value in this instance is very much, as always, in your purchase price. But as I mentioned, you need to be buying significantly under market value to make a project like that work. So some of the ways that we assess the market to make sure that there is room for this market to be growing in price is obviously some of your main metrics. So that's strong signs of infrastructure going into a particular area. It's declining days on market. It's a tightening vacancy rate. It's seeing the movement happening on ground and understanding that obviously a lot of people are coming to the area. There's going to be a lot of capital growth in that particular suburb. So obviously there's some of the main things you need to look out for. But then beyond that, every property, it takes a lot of research to make sure that it's actually going to work. Furthermore, you want to have pretty good understanding of the location and who is going to want to buy the property. So obviously if you're buying into a family area, you don't necessarily want to be buying a 2-bedroom house not changing the configuration, and then selling it as a 2-bedroom, because obviously the demand in that particular market for that property, it's not going to be very strong. You need to be understanding your market pretty well so that when it is time to sell, you have enough demand there that you're going to see quite a number of people hopefully fighting it out for the property. So where we did our first buy, renovation, sell, it was an area that not only first home buyers were trying to get into, but there were quite a few investors interested in that particular area. So that property was a 3x1 with a detached granny flat at the rear, which we were able to renovate and then turn into a 4x2. And we knew that there'd be a lot of interest because it not only appeals to first home buyers or families, but it also appeals to investors. So we did know that it would do quite well in that particular area. And I was able to time the market before it really boomed, so that a lot of the heavy lifting was not only done by the renovation, the fact that we bought it under market value, but also by the rising market, because particularly in places like Victoria, you need to factor in stamp duty. Stamp duty is very expensive. So when you're factoring in stamp duty, you really want to be going with a rising market. So at least the market going up each month can complement some of that stamp duty that you've paid. Now, not all properties will be purchased for renovate and sell. So some you purchase to renovate and hold. And I'm a really firm believer that this is an excellent way to see very large capital uplift very quickly. So another example, and I do help people buy property like this all of the time, is purchasing property that is under market value. Now, it doesn't need to be as largely under market value as a buy, renovation, sell project, but there just needs to be enough there that you're going to see a significant uplift quite quickly. So it's very easy for me to help clients purchase property that's, let's say, if they're purchasing 600,000, 700,000, maybe 800,000, it's quite easy to get properties that are $100,000 to $150,000 below market value if they're in need of a bit of a cosmetic uplift. Now, there's other properties that we've purchased that, they've been $150,000, $200,000 market value below, where you want to keep those in your portfolio for whatever reason. So by doing that renovation and giving it that cosmetic uplift, you're going to see that really large equity uplift quite quickly, so you're able to then purchase the next property. Now, when I take into account purchasing for myself versus purchasing for a client, when purchasing for a client, obviously if they're purchasing for renovation, they need to have a pretty good understanding themselves of feasibilities and things like that, because it's not something I can really do for clients just because there is some risk involved. So client versus myself, we have recently just purchased a property that is riddled with termite damage. Now, we're not too concerned by that because for us, we don't mind exactly how far we have to go into fixing the property. It probably just means taking some plaster sheets off the wall and having a bit of an investigation, maybe some more support beams through the ceiling. There's not too much there that we feel as though we can't do ourselves. Whereas if I'm looking for a client who's not very experienced in this, you could end up in situations that you're either not prepared for or experienced for. I'm going to give an example of a property that I purchased recently for a client. So this particular property we managed to secure for $540,000. It was in a very low socioeconomic area. So it's really important when you're buying in a particular suburb that you have a pretty good understanding of the type of people who are going to be living there and the standard that is required for that particular property. So in lower socioeconomic suburbs where the rents are quite cheap and cheerful is probably the best way to describe how a renovation should be done. So you don't need to do high end. You can just keep it nice, cheap, tidy with a little bit of modern edge. So take the $540,000 purchase, for example. If you were to spend about $20,000 on it, maybe even a little bit less if you were to do a little bit of the work yourself, that should be able to get you a cheap kitchen. So we can see kitchens get done from as cheap as $8,000 with stone. Then maybe a bit of a touch up to the bathroom, bit of a paint inside. If that property was on market with that level of upgrade that I've just mentioned, that property could go to market for around $620,000 to $630,000. So there's an $80,000 uplift in value where you've only spent maybe $15,000 to $20,000. So you can see that from day one, with that small investment and that little bit of time spent updating the property, it's quite worth it. You're going to get a stronger valuation faster, and also obviously your rental return will be higher. Now, I don't suggest people often renovate for the rental return because most cases the amount of capital you're going to invest into the property to do the renovation you might be lucky to see anywhere from $15 to $30 per week rental return. So most of the time it's not really worth it, but do your own numbers. And obviously that varies a lot. But as I said, you're more so doing it for the increase in equity. One of the biggest red flags I think to look out for when you're looking to purchase a property for renovation purposes is from the start, your feasibility needs to be so strong. Okay. So if you're looking at a property and you're trying to make it work and you're saying, oh, hopefully we can do this cheaper, or hopefully the market will have gone up by then, that's a major red flag. Your numbers need to be so tight. You also need to have a contingency on top of that. So when you're taking into account all these holding costs and renovation costs, you need to allow maybe $10,000, $20,000 of leeway just in case more is under the surface than you realize, which more cases than not often happens. So that would be the biggest red flag to look out for. That's in yourself trying to make numbers work that aren't there. So when considering buying in the Melbourne property market, I do believe that it is a very strong market right now to make buy, reno, holds work. So I see so much property, particularly in the areas where we're buying, and they're the areas where I do believe people will have the most capital growth. It's your really established areas. They're really established properties. So these properties, they're anywhere from 30 to 60 years old. So right now in a lot of these suburbs, you have a declining days on market. You have tight vacancy rates. So they're very strong markets to be buying into at the moment. And if you can secure an older style property, obviously off market is always ideal as well, because you're not going to have that level of competition. You're not going to have that level of interest. You will be able to manage to purchase that. You can do your cosmetic or renovation, whatever way you want to go about it, and you're going to see significant uplift. So how do you ascertain whether or not a property is worth renovating yourself? You need to work out how to put a fair market value on that property, and do not ask the selling agent, because they want to make that sale and they will tell you what you want to hear. So it's up to you to do your own due diligence, have a look at the value of your property, compare it to other recently sold properties within that pocket or that location that are quite similar, to ensure that you are truly purchasing this property below market value. And then have a look at the same types of properties but upgraded and renovated. However, the renovation needs to be like for like. If you are going to do a cheap and cheerful renovation, do not have a look at the property that you're looking at doing this cheap and cheerful renovation on and then compare it to somebody who has absolutely blown the budget and done some sort of high-end fittings on, because their property value will vary very much so from yours. So make sure it's like for like. Obviously, pairing this with your feasibility and taking into account all your holding costs and things like that, you'll be able to understand whether or not the property is worth renovating. Obviously, as a buyer's agent, I see volume of these type of properties, so I know pretty quickly what is worth renovating and what isn't. And I also get access to a lot of off-market deals that are amazing for cosmetic updates and renovations. And I often don't have a whole lot of clientele that are willing to do that type of work. I think most people see it as a little bit risky, they're a little bit time poor, but I do think there is so much value in doing it, and I do have access to a lot of these. So who should and shouldn't be renovating for profit right now, particularly in the Melbourne property market? If this is something you're looking to consider, I think you need to have a fairly strong understanding of trades to some extent. So whether that's somebody in the household, or whether you've done a renovation course, or you've got somebody who's able to support you throughout this, I think that will be ideal, because without a thorough understanding, without an idea of how much trades should cost, I think you could very easily be misled. If you were to get a quote for a kitchen, you could contact a couple of people that are local to you using something like Google, and you could end up with quotes for kitchens for $20,000, and instantly you may have paid $10,000, $12,000 more than had you have been guided by somebody who actually has a thorough trade insight. That $10,000 or $12,000, when taken into account for your whole budget, if you make little mistakes like that more than once, you're pretty much going to be left without profit. As usual, time and time again, I say there's agents you buy through, there's agents you sell through. So if you are looking to take on a project where you're looking to buy, renovate, sell, you want to make sure that you're aligned with the best, most strong selling agent in the area to sell your market. And don't forget to take your selling costs into account. So when you're doing your feasibility, that includes your conveyancing fees, your photography, staging, your real estate commission. All of those need to be taken into account. But if you're looking to buy a property where you want to renovate, that's when you want to align yourself with one of the agents in the area who are best to buy off for a below market value off market deal. So I hope this has given a little bit of insight. Obviously, I do have quite a strong understanding of buying, renovating, selling, holding. So if you have any more questions or anything else you would like me to delve into, definitely leave a comment. But I hope you have enjoyed today's solo episode. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, you know where to find me. Make sure to like and subscribe for all future episodes. Buying Melbourne, move with intention. Until next cycle.